Experts are warning that decrepit NHS buildings with flooded corridors and roofs at risk of falling in are all having an impact, as they would obviously, on patient safety and care. According to new figures, the cost needed to eradicate the backlog of NHS repairs in England has risen, would you believe this, to almost £16 billion, which is about £2 million more than the total spend for running the entire NHS estate. Experts warn that the health service can't keep wasting money propping up ageing buildings that are not fit for purpose. So would you be happy to pay more tax to fix our crumbling hospitals? Well, you've just had an operation yourself.
Oh, yes, I had two this year.
Yes.
Yeah, I've been in and out.
Well, what would you think if they taxed you more to keep the upkeep
Well,
of
for a start,
buildings?
I mean, it is really, really expensive to do up Victorian things, so they probably ought to build something else and use those, which would be perfectly all right for something else. And the other thing, I would love to know, I've always wanted to know, could you tell me, please, what are we spending our tax on? Because we're now trying to get to Birmingham 10 minutes quicker, and that would have done up all the hospitals or built as many as you wanted. And we don't seem to have any say on what tax we're paying. We will just be told, you are paying it. But I would like to know what I wouldn't like to pay for. Say, no, I do not want to pay for that, but I will pay for that.
Let's bring Belinda into this. Belinda, so nice to see you. So, £16 billion buildings, I mean, in common parlance, left to go to rack and ruin, pretty much.
I mean, for all the money that is taken from us by the government, we should have an NHS of utopia dreams.
Yes!
Our public services should be the best in the world. They have enough money. And so I feel very protective over the British taxpayer. I don't want them giving an extra penny to a government who seems to be unable to manage our finances. And 16 billion for all the repairs. I would say, as you mentioned, transform those Victorian buildings into academies for construction workers and plumbers, and then build new hospitals.
Yes.
We spend in this country £360 billion a year on quangos. Quangos are this kind of murky sort of civil service add-on administrative bodies. This is Tony Blair's idea. 360 billion goes to quangos. They're not needed. Imagine that's nearly 700 hospitals we could build with that.
Let's take a call. I'll come to you in a minute, Sam, but let's take a call from Rob, who's on the line in Cumbria. Rob, thanks for ringing. What do you feel about this? Would you pay more tax to keep the hospitals up to par?
Yeah, definitely. I'd happily pay more tax if I knew where it was going. It was going to the NHS and the hospitals. You know what I mean? I think they're spending billions on doing the House of Commons up, so I think they should work on the hospitals. And just recently, I think this government and successive governments have got the priorities wrong. Recently, I hurt my back and I went to the GP and said there was a 6 weeks to 6 months waiting list for physio. So I paid private. It was only £60. I'm a below average earner, you know what I mean? But I was back at work within 2 weeks. So I think the government have got the priorities all wrong. All these, what you guessed there, all these quangos, they need all these consultancy firms and, you know what I mean? It's just all these services and consultancy agencies. It's just milking money from the taxpayer, and you don't see anything for it. But I would happily pay more
when you
tax
ring
as long as I
in
could see
and
it.
say what you just said, which is I'm an ordinary working man, don't earn a huge amount of money, but I decided to pay to go privately because I needed to carry on working. I was in pain. They sorted me. I was back at work in 2 weeks. Did you ever dream that you were going to say something like that? You'd paid for private medicine. Did you ever think you'd say that?
No, because I'm a socialist at heart, so you know what I mean. But I just could not afford to be off waiting to see an NHS physio. So I didn't think I would ever say that. But I believe in the NHS, free at the point of use, and we shouldn't. And it's successive governments. I think they've all gone down the line of these agencies and these quangos, and it just bleeds money from the NHS and from other governments. Public services. I think we need to get back to looking where the money's going and seeing whether we need all these. You know what I mean? We pay billions on interest on these debts. Why don't we just wipe it all out and get the Bank of England to sort it out and You know what I mean? Why do we pay interest ridiculous amounts on? It's just a load of smoke and mirrors, I think.
Rob, thank you very much. I don't know if anyone at home is thinking what I'm thinking, which is, everybody knows if you own a caravan, a car, if you own a tiny little cottage, you've got to keep it up. If you don't, everything gets worse and worse and worse. A small hole in the roof turns into the whole roof falls off. We know that. That's one of the things of being a property owner or a householder or even someone with a car, even a bicycle, for goodness sake. So how have they let it get into such acute disrepair that it's going to cost us £16 billion to repair all the holes in all of the buildings? How can that have been allowed to happen? And what is the management layer of the NHS supposed to be doing? Isn't that what they're there for, to stop this kind of thing? Or am I being ridiculous and just comparing a huge thing like the NHS with a small cottage? I think it's the same principle. I'm going to ask Sam about this. I mean, how have they been allowed to get into this state of disrepair, though?
I think most people think, as you guys touched upon, there's a lot of money being spent, but is it being spent in the right places? But let's not forget, they did announce, this government, that they're shutting down NHS England. And a lot of NHS England, which was established by a Conservative government, was management levels, administrative levels, people doing publicity and marketing, all that sort of stuff. And one of the first things Wes Streeting did when he kind of got his feet under the table and looked at it all, he said, well, all of this costs got to go, and we got to put money into actually the front line of making people better. So we hope, because this isn't going to happen overnight, that some of that money will now be freed up, because it's not just important for patient safety and health. There's also an issue of dignity.
Of course there is.
If you go and visit an elderly relative in a hospital where there's like leaks in the ceiling, and it's just a dirty, unpleasant place to be, we need to, the dignity of which we treat our elderly people or our poorly people, that's a measure of a society. And actually keeping them in a decent building is important.
In corridors, people being held in ante-rooms, ambulances being stuck on the forecourt because there's nowhere at all to disgorge the patients. They've just got to wait there. Highly trained, highly qualified people who would like to be saving lives, they're just stuck in the forecourt. I mean, the whole thing doesn't sound good. But let's go to Matt in Brighton, who's just had some experience recently himself, unfortunately. Hi, Matt. Thanks so much for ringing. What happened?
Oh, hi, Vanessa. Nice to talk to you after so long speaking to you.
It's lovely to do. He used to phone me on my radio show on the BBC. Matt, how are you? I'm sorry to see on my screen it says you've been in hospital.
Yeah, I'm glued to you. You know I am. I can't wait for you to come back to Brighton. You used to ask everybody an impersonal question at 5:03, but I'm going to ask you the question. When are you going to come to Brighton and see everybody? We all need you here.
But you're lovely to say. I've been working 7 days a week, you might have noticed. 5 days here, 2 on LBC. When could I come to Brighton? I haven't had a chance. The minute I get a moment, I would love to come to Brighton. But tell me about being in hospital recently. I hope you're all right, though.
I'm okay, thank you. Well, Brighton A&E was like a war zone because it's quite small. The hospitals has had a big renovation, but the A&E is going to be renovated, they say, last. But all the seats were ripped, and it was overflowing with people. But I just think since this government came into power, the money hasn't been spent correctly, and the short staff, the seats are ripped. And I agree with your panelist, Slam. The money needs to be spent differently, and we can't afford any more tax rises because, the country, I hate to say it, it's on its knees. It's down to its ankles. People look sad when you go out, and the cost of living, people voted for change, and unfortunately, I know we're not talking about it, but we got the wrong change. We got the wrong Prime Minister. All
right, punchline of this story, did they make you better or didn't they?
Yes.
You see, there we go. So this is the whole discussion about, is the NHS broken? But there we are. Matt bounces back to Brighton and he's better. That's the crucial thing. Lots of people will think. Matt, lots of love to you. So nice to hear from you after all this time. Let's go to Chris in Hampshire. Hi, Chris.
Hello, Vanessa. How are you?
I'm all right, my darling. What do you think about this? Because, the buildings are falling apart, which is pretty awful.
Yes, I think this is a case of woeful neglect. For many years, they've not been investing in things. Things have deteriorated over time. It's even the basics. The last time I went to the hospital, the food was really bad because they shut the kitchens and it's now being shipped in. Hot meals coming in from Wales to be served hot. And even Florence Nightingale knew the basics were you feed good, nutritious food and medicine. Buildings are not being maintained. Hospitals are shut, everything's been centralised. It's all falling apart. We're paying all this money for what?
Well, I'm going to ask you the same thing, aren't I? I'm going to say you were treated in hospital, the food was horrible, Florence Nightingale would have been disgusted, but did they make you better in the end, Chris?
It took them 2 attempts, because the first time they fixed it, it then went wrong. I then had to go back in for a second go, and then they got it right on the second attempt. But, I mean, that was 2 trips to fix the same problem.
Right, but at least, I mean, you know, at least you're better and much more like your real self, which I'm very glad to hear. I mean, Sam, it's dispiriting, isn't it?
I think you're right. I mean, listen, it is important that we have like decent buildings and we treat patients in a decent way. But we have to manage our own expectations. I mean, the level of treatment me and anyone in my family has ever had in the NHS has been impeccable. Mm-hmm. I mean, it's incredible. It's the best in the world. People go private and, you know, you don't actually get the same level of care. You might get a lovely private room. There might be beautiful carpet. There might not be tears in the chair. Mm-hmm. But the level of treatment you get is not as good as you will get in the NHS.
But at least you get treated in the NHS. The waiting list is now up to about 7 million. So it's great when you actually finally get...
It depends on what it is you're waiting for, of course. It depends on what your illness is. And I take your point, people think we're paying too much tax. But I also think that one of the few things that everyone in this country more or less still agrees on is that we love the NHS, we respect it and we treasure it. And therefore, if the government were to ever try to tax people more for it, they would be well advised to call it, on people's tax returns, the NHS tax.
Yes.
Because then, going back to what you say, people are not worried that we're giving money and it's spent in vague ways on things we don't agree with.
Yes.
If there was something on your tax return that was earmarked as an NHS tax, I don't think as many people would be complaining about this
I don't
because
think
they'd be happy to pay it.
Hell of a good idea, if you ask me.
That is a really
excellent.
good
That's why we have
idea.
him on, because he has some really good ideas.
Very
That's
good.
really
I am
excellent.
available, West Streeting, for more of those.
Yes, I don't.
I do charge, though.
Not us, I hope. All right.